Oh, no, I want you to stand there and watch me and ask if we need to count. I'm a good, strong, independent woman. Yes, I'm going to read to you. I feel like people might like it. I feel like everybody would like if I went over every one of these books. Yeah, thank you. I just like watching these people who are just watch me struggle.
Next up.
Don't you worry. When I'm at the beach, I am, actually it's not true. Everybody here agrees that we have a place in Mexico that by fire they build. Even when I'm on vacation. And I always say that it's because I really don't like responding to someone's email. So when I'm sitting on the beach like that happens our house, it's okay. I can just type that.
I actually.
That's what recipe is on our show.
Thank you again. Love you.
Hey, Chris. What am I, chopped liver?
I touch it. Oh, like, please.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded by the board secretary, and there was an executive session prior to this meeting to discuss a personnel matter. Let's start with the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First up is approval of the minutes from the May 24th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Ms. Mitchell, second.
Second.
Mr. Kern, discussion? No discussion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Harner?
Yes, as I promised to the board a few weeks ago, when there was some questions about graduation requirements, I'm just curious if there's something we would want to get into tonight on that discussion. I guess one of the things was about attendance and also the other things that were required.
I would. Yeah. I mean, well, if we have a full agenda tonight, maybe it's appropriate for another time, but I would like to discuss it at some point.
Okay.
Agreed.
May I suggest that we do it in say again?
We had talked about grading guidelines and things for the August Ed Committee, so we can
So-
talk about that then.
We'll do it in the August Ed Committee and then bring that report to the board that night.
Sounds
So
great.
that's the 9th of August? Thank you. That completes the superintendent's report, sir.
That's got to be the shortest one ever, sir. That brings us to the first general public comment. Madam Secretary, has anybody signed up for comment?
Victor Bartholomew.
Good evening, everyone. Of course, my name is Vic Bartholomew, and I live in Milford Township. I know you're thinking about raising our taxes again, but any tax increase now, to me, is unacceptable. How do you look the taxpayers in the eye when you're thinking about closing another school, and according to your numbers, the enrollment is slowly dropping? Then raise taxes again? Sounds to me like we have an administrative problem. Everyone here can't wait to pay off their home. But when we pay it off, we have to lease it to the school district, and every year our lease goes up. When people who I know, people who have lived their entire life and sent their kids to our schools, can't stay in their homes because they can't afford to pay higher taxes every year, this district should be ashamed of itself, because I know I'm ashamed of this school district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bartholomew. Anyone else? Okay. Anyone in the audience like to make a public comment at this time? Okay. We will move on to the committee reports. First up is the Education Curriculum Committee. Mr. Anderson.
Tonight, we looked at a new German book for German AP. It's sort of hard to evaluate it when you can't speak it, but all I can say is it looked like it would be pretty challenging. It has lots of culture and German history in it, too, so I thought it was pretty good. And the new reading book, My Perspectives for grades 6 to 8, also looks excellent. I was looking at some of the readings, and they encompass a wide variety of topics, historical and otherwise, and I thought that was pretty good. And apparently, I don't know that much about the new Springboard, but the staff is very much in favor of going with the new Springboard for grades 6 to 8. And so I would concur with them. So that's all my report.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
If I can add, one of the things that Springboard's been very good about over every edition since we've been involved, and we were one of the model districts that helped the College Board develop that, the things that you were concerned about, other teachers were concerned about, they made their changes, and I would imagine that's why we're hearing this support.
Yeah, because it seemed like a surprise that some of the teachers who weren't necessarily in favor right now.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick, just a general question? I'm sorry. When I first got on the board, I asked this question, and the answer wasn't exactly satisfactory, but it's 4 years later, and the technology is so much more improved. Is there no vendor in the entire world, in the entire United States, that will sell digital books? I mean, everybody in our school has a computer. Why do I have to spend $200 for a textbook when we can digitally download it for $50? I mean, there's nobody.
So that's not accurate. All the publishers that we work with do have digital versions that we do purchase, but the piece there that's probably what you're not thinking is that when you gave that example of the textbook costing $200 and the digital version costing $50, it's actually $200 using your numbers for both. So they're served as a bundle. It's not like we can go out and just purchase the digital version of many books, or when we do, the cost may be somewhere as low as 50 cents or a dollar difference that we would be saving. So what we try to do wherever possible is purchase class sets, and then we purchase digital for every student. But like in the example of Springboard, when you purchase the book, you get the digital version. So there's no cost savings, or it's just the way that publishing. It's just the way that publishing has gone
Monopoly.
now.
It's time for somebody in this community to take it upon themselves to be entrepreneurial and create themselves a suite of software textbooks, and you create one, you sell it on, who knows how much you could sell it. If you were just selling that one book digitally, do you know how fast school districts around the country would snap it up if you're only selling it for $50?
Mm-hmm.
You're really paying for the content, not the platform.
Right, but
so
you
get
could
high quality content, and then the publisher doesn't really matter it doesn't matter to them which way you access their content. They're selling you the content, and if you want to access it in print form or you want to access it digitally, doesn't matter much to them. What they're selling to you is the information that they have in that book. For the content.
Though, why did we buy
Why isn't the content
physical books?
digitally?
Because that's how they sell it. You can buy it digitally, but we shared the example of Springboard. You buy the digital version and they mail you the print books. It just comes together in a package, shrink wrapped together, like or you get the license.
But there's something different in the book that you can't get on the online version?
No,
So what do we do with the books?
give them to students.
Why?
Because a lot of students prefer a hard copy book. A lot of students prefer to be able to mark their text, especially when they are consumables. They like to be able to write out, to highlight, to underline, to be able to flip back and see that the work that they've done. And some students prefer a digital version, but we have a great number of students who feel very connected to a physical text.
Go to Comcast, Ron, and see if you can just purchase ESPN.
It's a great analogy.
So quick question.
Sure.
So when students are saying that they're complaining that they can't take their textbook home, they have a digital version that they can access?
In most cases. So remember that a lot of this curriculum work has only been in the past 2 or 3 years since we've been kind of renewing the cycle. So if they are in a class that maybe has had textbooks that are 8 and 10 years old, there wouldn't have been a digital version with that.
Okay.
And certainly at the high school, we work more in digital because every student has a laptop in front of them. So we want to give them that access. And at the elementary level, we feel really strongly that students need a text in front of them, especially when they're still learning how to read and they're learning how to do computational math. Asking them to do that by clicking a mouse isn't reasonable for most kids, so we're still purchasing hard copy consumable books at the elementary and middle school levels, but it shifts as the needs and as the programs become available. And some publishers have more robust online programs than others. So there are certain programs where maybe what they have available online is literally a PDF copy of the book. May not be helpful. And then we have other things like the science curriculum that we're currently looking at in middle level that hopefully we'll be adopting in 2 years, has an incredibly robust online with videos and different scenarios, virtual labs. I mean, so it really depends.
I'm sure at some point in the future it will be all digital because that's where we're going. But anybody in the audience that wants to start a new business, I think there's an investor at the end of the dais.
Writing content is a lot harder than it looks. I'll share that with you.
All right, next is the Facilities Committee. Mrs. Mitchell.
That's me. Okay, so today we discuss a variety of topics, one of them being the Panther Cafe Coffee Shop, which we have a lovely picture here, if anybody is interested in getting a close-up look. Okay, there we go.
And it's at no cost to the district.
Yeah, no cost to the district. So Chartwells would actually be fronting the cost for this, should they get the renewal of the contract. So that's really great news for us, and this will enhance the dining experience for the high schoolers. I'm sure they'll be excited about that. What's that? Okay. So we also discussed the Milford Middle School and other vacant land appraisals. And one thing that stood out to me was when we got a couple of different appraisals on the Milford Middle School property. And apparently, if we were to demolish the building, the land is not worth a whole lot. One appraisal company said after you subtract the demolition cost, that it would be at about $442,000, and the other said it would actually be negative $237,000. So my suggestion to the board would be for us to hold on to that property as it's in a really ideal location for potential growth in the future. Then the other appraisal was for the property that is on West Pumping Station Road. And one appraisal was at $2.2 million, the other at $2.98 million. Okay. We had a presentation by Dewey, our construction management company, and they gave us a presentation about all the phases in the Nidec renovation project. So they have a plan right now to phase that into 3 phases. And of course, we all know, and we knew this going in, that anytime you have a renovation project, that there are some challenges in terms of the noises, the smells, the safety issues for a renovation that would take place while kids were actually in school. We found out that we would have to have modular systems, which would be additional cost, And so one idea that we're sort of floating around that you might hear more about, so we're not, just preface, we're not committed to this, it's just an idea that we're floating around, is, and as I mentioned to, in the committee, I have a personal bias, so full disclosure, like, my son, of course, it would be his last year attending NIDIC, so of course, for me, I'm a little sad, but this does sort of make sense, would be to have NIDIC students attend Tohickon Valley for 1 year while the construction would take place at NIDIC. And this would save us about $1 million, at least projected at this point, and also 6 months in terms of time, overall time, for the project. So it is pretty compelling. So despite my personal bias, of course, I'm logical, and I think it is something we should look more into. But we have to really, I think, be careful the way that we share this with the public and give them the whole picture, because I think everybody's first reaction is going to be like, no, like, that this seems crazy.
And for clarity, though, this isn't next year. This is the year after next.
Yes, thanks for clarifying. This would not be for this upcoming year. It would be for the year following. So there's a lot of different factors that we have to take into consideration. You know, will the noise and the safety issues really impact learning? And could we save money and then shorten the time for this project? So it's just something to consider, and we're doing a little bit more research. We're also taking a look at transportation costs, because of course we're going to have kids from Haycock having to be transported to Tohickon Valley, and we certainly are sensitive to elementary school children being on a bus for, you know, several minutes. You're talking about redistricting students. So we're weighing all of the options and trying to get more information, and then that information will be shared with the public who happen to be in that region to give us some feedback on that. Okay, I don't know if, for the air quality, I don't know that, was that something that I missed? That we, okay, so there's RFPs that are currently being put out there for asbestos and indoor air quality, things like that, for the NIDIC project. And I apologize, I was a little bit late to the meeting, so please feel free to jump in if I miss anything. So there's a traffic study that for the NIDIC elementary renovation project as well, and we received some proposals to conduct a traffic study. Would you like to add anything on that might be important?
The three items that went out, the three RFPs that went out a week or two ago, are all related to the NIDIC project and are all things we need to do to continue with the permitting process. So the RFPs did go out. They're now back. We picked the lowest bid or proposal for each of them, and that's what the board's voting on tonight.
And same for the geotechnical?
Yes. Yep. That's the third one. Yep.
Okay. So we also talked about the high school band tower change order, and initially when we were looking at this was going to be a total cost of maybe $25,000, and of course we're very supportive of that. But then we received the actual pricing of this, and that would be $54,000, so considerably more than what we initially thought. So now at this point we're looking at how we can do this in-house to try to save some money, and also use some of our bond money to cover the cost for that.
Maybe Upper Bucks could do it.
So the drivers, because we wanted to use bond money, and because it was a change order on the bond that was associated with the high school renovation project, that's the driver for this increased cost. So if we don't use bond money, and we do it, and we take our own money later on and invest in it, it would be back down at a reasonable rate, a reasonable number. And further, they wouldn't be able to do it until sometime September, October-ish. So we have some time to kind of tease that out.
Thank you for adding that.
Are we talking about the white structure in the parking lot of the?
There's so next to the new turf lot, I'm sorry, the turf field, they would erect a tower that they can then observe the marching band.
A new one.
A new one, not the wooden one that's,
In the parking lot?
yeah.
Right.
No,
So
this would
it's
be-
bigger than that for
Yeah,
55
this is
grand,
like-
I hope.
This is like a
Right.
tower,
Just-
like a
just
three-story
checking.
tower.
Are you interested in buying the old one?
Not at the, my neighbors, you know?
They might think you're a little.
It also would serve multiple purposes, which was another part of like why it was attractive for us to invest in. Okay, so, and this is one I actually have a question about for the Boucher and James, overseeing the sixth grade center parking lot improvement. So, okay, so that's gonna be, what we thought, 686,000, about 700,000, I think is what we were ballparking that would to be. So what exactly is the $34,000 is for oversight? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
That's what we, I asked that question.
Okay, sorry.
So,
Wasn't there?
that was for, they're doing all the site work in preparation for the project renovation, the
Okay.
parking project renovations. So there'll be the folks on site that make sure that the things are getting done correctly and to the specifications that we've asked them to do it at. They've already done some of the prep work. They've already done some work in preparation for the parking lot renovation project.
Correct. And the way that little mini contract is written is that it's a number not to exceed 5%, but the district has full control over the hours they work. So at any time, we can say, you know, we don't need you to work any hours this week, or we feel good about the project, we don't need you to continue. So we have a lot of control over hours and costs in that contract.
Okay, so that's not, so it's not necessarily overlap for what Nice Construction would be providing us in terms of like oversight. I mean, I guess
It's oversight of, Nice Construction is the contractor, it's oversight of them and their work.
Okay.
Sort of like how Dewey
general
Engineering is the contract construction manager for Neidig. This is that on a much, much smaller scale.
Okay, I gotcha. Okay, last item is just reviewing some of the capital projects that we have going on this summer. While the kids are out of school, of course, that's the ideal time. POF, we are going to be changing out the HVAC controls. Richland Elementary, we are going to be renovating the restrooms there. In Trumbowersville, we're going to be replacing the roof. And then, of course, the sixth grade center parking lot pavement. That is my report. Anybody else want to add anything I might have missed?
I think you got it all.
Sorry, that was long. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell. Next is the Quakertown Community Education Foundation with Mr. Jackson.
The Ed Foundation met on Wednesday morning. We really didn't do anything because unfortunately we didn't have a quorum. Most of our administrative level people were all in their own private meetings and didn't choose to attend ours. Plus a lot of people are on vacation, obviously, so we didn't do anything. But I do want to highlight a previous act. The Ed Foundation has taken it upon itself to begin an annual purchase of one reading book per first grade graduating student. And those were given out back in April. So it's a big thing we've done, trying to get the Ed Foundation a little bit more exposure in the community. I know we're looking possibly to have some corporate sponsorship in that going forward. So if there's anybody out there who would love the opportunity to help out the Ed Foundation, get your name played in a book to give to a first grade kid, something to consider next year.
Is that a digital book?
Darn what should be. No, it's not. Thank you. That's all I have for that Ed Foundation.
Sorry, Mr. Jackson, I couldn't help myself there. And that brings us to the President's Report. We conducted a board retreat on Saturday, June 1, 2018. During the retreat, annual evaluations of the superintendent and 2 assistant superintendents were reviewed. As required by state law, the results were posted on the Quakertown Community School District website. In addition, the completion report for the 2017-2018 superintendent goals was reviewed, and the 2018-2019 superintendent goals were discussed. I'd also like to take a moment to mention what a phenomenal job the team did at our commencement ceremonies last week. Of all the ones I've been to over the years, including my own kids, that was the most fun that I think I've ever had. And I see Mr. Lechner in the audience. You guys were phenomenal. You did a great job. And Dr. Harner, if you ever make us dance in public again.
That was awesome. I have to tell.
Jackson next year, sir.
I'm down with that. It was so funny because I have to tell a little story. It was a great time, by the way. It really was. It was exciting and just an honor to be there with the students for such an accomplishment. So I look over at Ron, and Dr. Harder was talking about dancing, and Ron's like, I am going to be sitting right here in this chair. He's like, I am not getting up. I looked at him, I said, no rhythm? He's like, none at all. And then, but he got up like a good sport. He did, even though he was like, you know. So.
Well, anyway, job well done to everybody in that, and Mr. Lechner. All righty, that brings us to public comment on the fiscal agenda. Is there anyone that would like to comment publicly on the fiscal agenda that we'll be discussing this evening? All right, I'll take that as a no. That brings us to the fiscal agenda, and the first item up is approval of the final budget for fiscal year 2018-2019 as presented. The administration is requesting approval of the final budget for fiscal year 2018-2019. This includes commitment of fund balance from the general fund for the capital projects for 2018-2019, with the amount to be determined by the administration following the completion of the annual audit. The 2018-2019 final budget for fiscal year 2018-19 totals $110,425,941. The amount includes $800,000 in budgetary reserve. The proposed millage rate is 164.39, an increase of 6.62 mils, or 4.2%, over the 2017-2018 millage rate of 157.77 mils. The proposed expenditures are $1,198,985,000 more than the 2017-2018 budget, for an increase of 1.10%. Capital projects commitment of fund balance in accordance with the Government Accounting Standards Board, the GASB, Statement 54, and Board Policy 620 fund balance. The board annually may commit or constrain a portion of fund balance for specified purposes, which can include capital projects, with the amount to be determined following the close of the fiscal year, but prior to the final audited financial statements being prepared. So this will be a roll call vote. So we're looking for a motion to approve the proposed final budget as presented. Ms. Mitchell, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. McCucci, discussion.
Mr. Klein, the current budget as submitted includes the reduction of a staff member in the music department. This was not as I understand it, not somebody in the union, therefore not a furlough, but a long-term substitute, as I understand. That was the staff level. Is that correct? The music department position that's being not carried through?
It was through attrition, sir.
Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry. That's right. Appreciate the clarification. Due to an attrition, the number of music department personnel, staff members, is going from 12 to 11. That's the way the current budget is situated. I would like to amend the motion on the table to request that a music department personnel be reinstated into the budget for next year and continuing at the discretion of the administration. I wish to amend the budget to include monies for such a personnel.
I would second that.
And I'm just curious, what would be, and I'm supportive of it, but what's the overall cost to reinstate?
Mr. Shaw, could you comment on this? Would this require an overhaul of what has been presented tonight?
Yeah, so in the motion that is on the table, it does outline what our expenditures are in the 18-19 budget. I would recommend that you add $100,000 to that line item to account for the new position. So the 110,425,941, I would change that to 110,525,941.
Is that going to change the millage rate? And
No, the millage rate would only change if the revenue, the tax increase would change.
okay. So we have a motion
So
to.
would the tax increase cover that cost?
With that
You could build
tax,
it, in other words, there will be money in the budget if it goes off at 4.2 to replace that teacher position,
so
correct?
what would happen is it would only change the fund balance usage. So the 4.2 didn't cover the budget as is. We're using fund balance. So now we would be using, I don't have the top of my head, if it's 750,000 of fund balance, we would now be using, we're now using 867,331 of fund balance.
Okay.
Taking it out of savings.
So we have a motion by Mr.
But
Jack.
we put money into the fund balance this year, correct?
Correct.
Oh.
That unaudited anyway.
To the extent of what? What was the total dollars?
Yeah, it's about 800,000, but that's an estimate. We wouldn't know. It's 847,000. Now that's an estimate based off of our projected actual spending for 17-18. We'll know what it actually is when we get our audited numbers and close out our books over the summer. And just so everybody's aware, I mean, a 1% margin of error would eliminate all of that, which was about what we had last year between our projection and our actual audited numbers was about $1 million difference.
To the positive, though, right? You don't, in other words, we're not expecting an audit to come back and we'll have $1 million to owe.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are we having a discussion now about the music teacher, or are we
Well,
having,
there's
Discussion, yeah.
yeah.
right now, right?
Right now.
Okay.
And then we would have to vote on amending,
Correct.
correct? And that vote would have to take place before the vote on the budget that's been presented, correct?
That is correct.
And we could still vote on the budget tonight, we would just,
Yeah, and we're
Okay.
going to vote on the budget tonight. It's just whether,
Yeah, the motion on the table is to put back a music staff position, yes or no?
okay. So we have a motion by Mr. Jackson that was seconded first by Mr. Akmanowitz. Any other discussion on adding a music teacher to the budget?
So I think for clarification, can somebody sort of lay out what the elimination looked like and versus, in other words, what are we really voting on? I understand there's a person here that we're talking about, but what do we change and how does that change the course of action for the students?
First off, there's no the person is out of the inventory through attrition, so there's no negative action happening out here to get us from 12 to 11. Just so this is just an add back, and I would like Ms. Edwards or Dr. Hoffman, would you address the numbers and all that? And where we're at right now and why our current budget does not have that position included in the budget. That's probably the best way to ask you to present.
All right. The reduction, we had presented some data at the last meeting or the meeting before about the elementary instrumental music groups. The elementary instrumental teachers set their own schedule based on the students in the building that need instruction, and so we had them send all the schedules. Now, after the fact, there were some questions that there may be 2 less groups of 1 and 2 more groups of 2, but I based the data off the schedules that the teachers themselves prepared with all the students listed in their groups. And what we saw from that was the elimination of the position would increase the average group size from 2.54 students to 3.12 students. It would not change the amount of instruction. In other words, the students would still have, I believe it's a 33-minute lesson each time in the cycle. So it changes nothing other than the group size. So if there was 1 tuba at Tehiccan Valley and that student is now at POF where there's another tuba student, then there might be 2 students in that group instead of 1. But other than that, it should not have any impact on the experience that students have in terms of their music instruction.
Plus, the attrition that we had this year was choral music, not band. And how we deliver services for the most part is you have band teachers and you have choral music teachers. And the plan for next year, since we're going, last year, first off, when we closed the school, part of the furlough or the staff reduction process, we did not, a music teacher wasn't let go last year, and we did not have a position. So we were over what we needed. And so when we had this attrition in the middle of the school year, we didn't need to add it back in. So again, this is not, and some of the discussions and emails that you're receiving is, well, we want to turn this choral music position into a band position. And I believe that I've got that right. Is that correct, Eric? I'm honoring you with an opportunity to,
Yeah.
that's the position that, at least that I'm hearing out there, and then I think that's been presented to you in emails.
So is it a band position or is it a choral,
Well,
a chorus position?
Well, they're asking for just keeping it there, and I would like, if you do this, it would be what the administration would want to do with that position, would be to optimize our choral music program, not,
Is that what you're looking for?
and that was your motion.
The issue about the staff members, there's a lot of different vested interests, both elementary level, middle school level, and high school level, that all have an opinion as to where this staff member should come from. My motion is simply to put it back. What that form takes is for a higher level discussion than we're sitting here tonight.
I don't know if this is appropriate or allowed, but since this is something that was not necessarily expected from the public, is there a way we could allow anyone who wants to speak on the topic?
I appreciate the comment, but due respect to that, there was a lot of conversations via emails through the community that this motion actually would be made tonight. And since public comment was made available, perhaps public comment should have been happened then.
I obviously second the motion to, keep our music teacher, music program rich. My imagination was that we were reinstating or getting a new teacher to keep a 12th position to teach musical instruments and maybe even start our symphony. Now there's talk of it as a choral position, which, that's not necessarily what I'm moving to spend $100,000 on. So what are we discussing right now? If we're going to reinstate a position, what will that role be? And I do think that it would be of merit to listen to Eric and just hear what he has to say about this.
The administration would recommend against that. But that we would evaluate it, and that the administration, if you're having the community dictate what we do with the position, I would rather have a kindergarten teacher or a specialist at the high school if I needed another teacher. If I had rank order, this would probably be my 5th priority, guidance counselor. We've heard about guidance, a mental health professional and all that kind of stuff. So if you're getting into specifics about staffing, I would like it to be put in the administration's hand to work with the music department, but it be something that we do. If you're targeting that, I prefer that you target our core academic needs.
But again, the question you're looking for an answer certain. Okay, we want to reestablish this 12th person. What exactly are that person's duties going to be next year? My point, and I think it's still valid, is that there's a lot of different interests, even in this audience right now, as to what that position should look like. The elementary school teachers, music staff is not here tonight. They might have an opinion. The band teachers are not here tonight. They might have an opinion. For us to sit up here right now and decide for them what that position should be, I think is a disservice. That's why my motion is simply to put back the position, and what will be, will be. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to let them decide.
But technically, if you're asking for that position to be put back, if it was a Carl teacher, correct?
His motion was to let the administration decide, and I support that.
Okay.
Having something where we're saying we're going to do this or do that, first period, second period, that's what you have us do. And
Yeah, I agree. I'm just
Yeah,
trying to understand more about what we were.
I was hoping for like a contralto music instructor.
Contralto.
Did I? Is that right? Okay.
Okay, so I guess the next step is to vote on Mr. Jackson's motion to add a 12th music teacher to be decided by the administration as far as where that teacher goes, but within the music department, correct?
yes, sir. And I believe that meets the needs of what the Quimpo and their position as an organization and our department is looked for overall. But within the department, frankly, there's opinions all over the place on how that should go. And I think that's what you count on us to do for you.
And at our peak, how many staff members did we have in the music program? We have 11 now? 16.5.
Was the number bantered about
What, 5 years ago?
7 years ago?
It was a long time ago. It's been over years that the attritions happened.
Okay. Does this need to be a roll call vote, or
Has to do with the budget, so yes.
it does?
You're
Okay.
amending the presented budget.
Okay. Madam Secretary?
Mr. Anderson?
I will. I guess I'll say yes.
Mr. Kern?
I'm viewing it like marketing, so I'll say yes.
Mr. McCucci?
Cracks me up. I can't even say yes.
Are you saying yes?
He said yes. Yeah.
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Akmanowitz?
Yes.
Ms. Weed?
Yes.
Mr. DiLiberto?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Klein?
Yes.
Unanimous, the motion passes.
I think that's our first unanimous vote.
We've had some.
Oh, on little stuff, but I think that's our first unanimous vote.
We'll see how the next 10 minutes goes.
No.
Mr. President, may I make another motion?
Uh-oh.
What if I say no?
You have every right to say no, but I have every right to make a motion.
Yes, you do.
To Mr. Bartholomew's point regarding taxes, the recommendation from Mr. Bartholomew is zero taxes. I appreciate that, Mr. Bartholomew. I share your opinion. I've said that every year. I think Mr. Klein can at least state that he at once did vote no on a budget, and proudly said it was because he was in support of no taxes versus even going to the Act 1 that we did that year. So that everybody's aware, the budget that's being approved tonight is actually a budget where our expenses exceed our revenue by about $760,000. So at a 4.2% tax increase, we're putting out a budget that's going to put us further in the hole. Now, we also have other budgets to consider in a way, because we have talked about other tax increases. There was at one time, somebody threw out a 6.12% tax increase. I think that was because that was maximum exceptions. Act 1 was 2.8. That was the number bantered about by a lot of people. And there's been a compromise budget that has been floated at 3.5%. Each budget, regardless of which one it is going to end up with a negative balance. A 2.8% tax increase, which is Act 1, we're looking at a fund balance drop of $1.6 million. Now, to Mr. Bartholomew's point, I'm sorry, sir, I cannot make a motion on the floor today to ask for a zero tax increase. I apologize. But I will make a motion on the floor that rather than the 4.2% tax increase proposed, we consider the 2.8% tax increase. That is my motion.
So wait, you're going to motion.
Okay, hold on a second. We have.
I've made the motion. You heard the motion.
Okay,
the motion is
There's already a motion on.
No, there is. I'm asking to amend the current motion.
I believe, Ron, that what has to happen now, since we've had a motion and a second for the 4.2, allow that vote to take its course. Depending on the outcome of that vote, then we would then look at alternate budgets, of which the 2.8 or the compromise 3.5 would then be looked at. Am I correct in that, sir?
The motion on the floor is to approve the 4.2% budget increase as amended.
Well, but Mr. Klein's point is a valid one. There's no point in me amending it to a different rate if we've got a vote on the rate on the table.
It's been amended to include the additional music.
Oh, correct. I'm sorry. Correct. Okay. Then let me withdraw that and proceed.
You understand what I'm saying?
I do. You're right. You're
Okay.
correct. You're correct.
Any other discussion?
Yes. So I just thought I would give the public a little bit of a glimpse into the current financial situation, as I've spent a whole lot of time and analysis really poring over the numbers. And just so everyone knows, one of my suggestions is so the board can become a little bit more well-versed when it comes to the numbers, I think we should have a quarterly review to be able to actually go through the numbers and understand and be able to ask questions so everyone is familiar enough to make informed decisions, which I feel like is really important, because it's true, not everyone is a numbers person, but that's no excuse for not at least being able to familiarize yourself when it comes to over $100 million decision. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the drivers that are going into this shortfall, and some of them you might be familiar with, some of them you may not. So for the purpose of the audience, maybe those listening, perhaps even some of the board members here. So despite the fact that this could be a little long-winded, so apologies up front. The teacher salaries, despite having staff reductions or contractual obligations, are causing a $443,000 increase from the previous year. We are investing additional monies into teachers' aides, and the trend for investment in teachers' aides has continued to increase. The trend has increased over year for the past several years. That from last year is a $144,000 increase. You may know that medical and prescription costs are increased, but you might be shocked to know that from last year, the increase is $762,000. Retirement, we've heard of the situation with Beezers. Obviously, the good news is that it's going to hopefully be leveling off in the upcoming years. Nonetheless, there's a $652,000 increase from last year. There's a lot of increases in our the IU costs as well as for special needs and special education. So I wanted to just review some of these. From last year to this year, the Bucks County IU, we're going to be paying an additional $359,000 compared to last year. Under the other professional services, which includes occupational therapy, speech therapy, things like that, it's a $439,000 increase from last year. It's a pretty significant increase for just those two items. Because we are now putting $1 million aside in the budget for capital projects, and we have facilities obviously that are needing attention desperately, we have an increase of $1 million from last year in our construction services. Student transportation from last year has gone up $205,000. Of course, we're very proud that we're able to bring back in-house for our Quakertown Academy. We're actually going to be saving approximately $200,000 from last year, so we're really excited about that program. But the bottom line is charter schools continue to take money away from this district. We're paying additional supplies from last year, over $100,000. Software for the RELA programs, $137,000. Electricity, $100,000. Our interest in bonds as well as our principal payments is about $500,000 greater. And a lot of that is because of the Neidig renovation project that will be taking place. So we've already got the bonds for that. So we're going to have to start paying on that. So those are that's just an overview of the big ticket items. Those are obviously large increases. And some other things I want the board as well as the community to take into consideration is obviously, like I mentioned, with the facilities, that has to be a priority for us, obviously, to really make sure we're staying ahead of the game, that we're preparing down the line. We really don't know what's going to happen with the property taxes. That does have me a little bit concerned just in terms of foresight, trying to think through if the property taxes are eliminated, could that mean it's going to put us in a tough spot where we're not going to get as much revenues, and that we really should plan for that more in the future? It seems like the trends for special education is increasing at a significant rate year over year. So that despite the fact that our enrollment's declining, we're still seeing a trend where special education needs are increasing significantly. In fact, it is quite possibly going to be an even bigger driver year over year than what Beezers has been. So with all those variables in mind, and when you look at the projections, and hopefully you all did look at the projections that Zach did send over, if we go if we stay only at the Act 1, of course, our shortfall, we'd be looking at $1.6 million. And then, of course, even if you were to take out the Milford demo cost, which is $580,000, then we'd still be at about $1 million shortfall. Now, obviously, the new board here is in a really tough position, and I can assure everyone that nobody wants to raise taxes. That's absolutely the last thing that anybody wants to do. But that being said, we also have to prepare for the future, and we have to set ourselves up for success. And what's most important to me is that we are having some forethought. We're thinking ahead. We're planning ahead. We want to keep the fund balance healthy. We should look at this also from, what's the impact on the average taxpayer
from the 2.8 to the 4.2. So I just want to mention all these things to say that for me personally, and I know for other board members, that we're taking this seriously. We're trying to look at all the numbers and have some forethought and plan ahead. And the projections that Zach gave us for the 5-year projections, if we go with Act 1, would be that our fund balance would greatly suffer in the future. And I also want you to keep in mind that the NIDIG renovation project payments are going to increase. Zach sent me a link. I think you might have copied the rest of the board on that, but the NIDIG payments are going to stay pretty steady, but then they're going to take a really big increase over the years. And so all that being said, I just think that we all need to take those things in consideration. And philosophically, I realize that some of you really want to just stick to the Act 1, but understand that the consequence of that could be that our district will suffer, in the long term.
I believe that just sticking to Act 1 probably put us in this tight position that we're in right now. It left us very little room to wiggle.
Well, I think what worries me is that the district has been set up. I mean, we closed 2 schools, and now we have crammed the kids into these other buildings, and we really have nowhere else to go if we aren't able to fund things in the future. And there is stuff that is looming that we haven't even talked about, the safety and security measures, added, preventative maintenance stuff. We have the issue with Quakertown Elementary and their HVAC system. So we have big ticket items that are looming in the future. So here's the deal. It either hits us incrementally, a little bit at a time, and it stings. There's no doubt about it. Or if you look back at the history of the tax increase, this poor board in 2004, 2005, that increased taxes 14.4% in 1 year. And that's the realistic thing. So you either take it incrementally, and I think with the goal of, if the numbers hold true and the predictions are accurate with a declining enrollment, that you would someday need less teachers and theoretically get to a point where there may not be any tax increase. But I think the other part of the story is we have to be cautious about spending money and then bringing money in. And so I think Kaylin did a phenomenal job of really giving us a good dissection of what the operating budget looks like. Because when you start adding the 250s and the 300,000s up, it becomes real money quick. And so while we want nice things like the music teacher that we all voted for tonight, we've got to recognize that has to be funded somehow. And so staying at Act 1, and I look back and it's been years of Act 1. I just don't know what's next. I mean, if we could predict the future, what happens in health and insurance next year? It went up close to $750,000 this year. What happens? What happens if it goes up another $500,000 or $700,000 next year? What do we do? Are we sitting here at the same meeting saying, look, we're going to get rid of the music teacher? I don't know, guys. I mean, I think we have to almost try to predict the future, as difficult as it is, and at least position ourselves for some semblance of normalcy, if you can, in the budgetary world of public education.
Can I ask one question of the facilities or the administration? Because I get this question a lot in the community. The land that was bought under a previous board, I guess on Pumping Station Road, that's vacant, and we keep hearing about declining enrollment. It's just a piece of property that is sitting there. I'm not sure why it was purchased. But what are the thoughts about selling that and raising some revenue from land that apparently, if we have declining enrollment, is not going to be used anytime in the near future?
I think it's a good point. I don't know that we've ever really had serious discussions about what we're going to do with that property. I think if we're thinking about keeping Milford Middle School property, then it might not make sense to hold on to both properties, but then again, I haven't done a lot of thought about that. I don't know if any of you all have any comments on that.
Back when that property was purchased, it was, first of all, we got a very good deal on that property. It was bought below market value.
Almost half.
Yep. And at the time, the discussions were, and this was before the structural budget deficit became apparent, that there was going to be the need to build a hybrid school that would serve both, I believe, the elementary and middle school students because of the condition of some of the school buildings in our inventory. So it would be closing some of the ones that we have since closed and others, and move to a new school on that property. It was also determined at that time and discussed that because of the value of that land and where we were able to buy it, that it would be a good investment, that at the very least we could turn around and resell that property and make money on it, okay? And that was all done before the structural budget deficit hit us, okay? So I would say that that still is a good investment and has been, and considering what's going on in that area, could still be. And that certainly would be something to be discussed if it was decided that we no longer need that property. What do we want to do with it? Do we want to sell it? I'm sure there'd be people very interested in buying it right now. Or if something else changes in the future, if we see a huge increase in enrollment and maybe we have to look at possibly building a new school. We've got the land for it, and that's, you know, a huge part of if you need to build a new school is purchasing the land.
And you're not going to find a huge piece of land like that anymore that's going to be affordable if we do need to buy it.
Correct.
And for the 1.5 million we spent, we sit on it. I mean, there's no reason to sell it for $750, $1 million. It's a drop in the bucket for what we need. It's high ground. And I say that, that's important, high ground.
There's a lot of wetlands.
Yeah. So it's a wonderful property to have, and over the next few years, we may decide that we do want to build that school because things change, and we don't know which direction it's going to go. Maybe we not be so pessimistic. Maybe we could be optimistic.
Yeah, but what I'm hearing in the community, and I'm just reflecting what feedback I get as well, is that that land is just sitting here, and you're speaking out of two sides of your mouth if you're talking about decreasing enrollment, and you're not going to build a school for another 10 years. I mean, we also have land on Milford. You know, you close two schools. Two schools are closed, and then you're sitting on vacant land that you could sell for $1.5 million
Well,
right
it's
now.
actually the appraisals came back at 2.2 and 2.8.
2.2 and $2.8 million.
I think it's a valid concern.
I think it's a very valid consideration.
Well, like I said, I think that's something that certainly can be discussed. I will, yes, sir.
If I can summarize last time that it was discussed, there was a discussion from the Facilities Committee, the Community Facilities Committee, of having a 10-year plan and having a vision. We didn't have any kind of vision. We weren't taking care of our buildings. We didn't have an annual capital improvement budget. We didn't have. And you got to plan for the future. And yes, we do currently have declining enrollment. We do, and you've seen the projections. And as of this morning, when I was talking to Janelle, who does our enrollment statistics, we don't have the end of year numbers yet. We'll share them with you. But projections for next year, the incoming kindergarten class, we're about the same as where we were last year, which means we're continue to have about 75 students below what we normally bring in an academic year. So that means as we push that up through, it goes into fourth grade, Ms. Edwards, fourth grade next year or fifth grade next year, where we have 75 less fifth graders, and then the following year, 75 less sixth graders and all that. But things change, and you got to prepare for that. So it's a strategic asset. It was built, at the time, it was purchased for a short-term development. As you recall, here we were in January, we had 30 people from the community who were all living around there listening to the board's plan for developing the property, and then we get to the finance meeting and they have a structural deficit and they have declined to raise taxes above index to take care of all that. And then the subsequent closures of buildings to get the structural deficit under control.
But this is part of what I'm hearing from the community and what I'm talking about. Particularly, I am from Milford. With the respect of the closure of Milford Middle School, that was done very, very quickly. And those of us in the community, particularly where I live in Milford, were like, oh my God, you're in 3 months, you decide you don't have money, you close a middle school that the students love, and now you're busing people over to Strayer. And I hear from a lot of people that have their kids at Strayer now that live in my community. You know, I don't care what other board members here say, I'm from Milford. They're not happy about it. People in my neighborhood are not happy about having to be bused to Strayer, and the classes are crowded. So you make a decision like that, and you hold on to land that's $2.2 million that's not going to be built on anytime soon, and we have this land in Milford that's also high ground. You know, we need a plan, and I agree with that, but you know, you can't just shut 2 schools and then say, oh, we're going to hold on to some vacant land that could generate some money. I don't get it, and neither do the people I hear from. I don't understand that reasoning.
So the libertarian in me says government should own property, sell it. It changes.
Well, I don't
But
know
the
why,
point-
I understand maybe it was bought 3 or 4 years ago with that thought, but if
Well,
we're
in
saying.
other words, put it into the hands of people that'll make use of it. We're sitting on it, but the school board member in me says, all right, let's roll forward. Let's say we need to build, to David's point. We sell that. Where are you going to build? Like, why do you think St. Luke's is building not in town? Right, they're building the
They're
thing
building near
on
my
663,
house.
Right.
They're
Why do you
building
think
near
that is?
Milford.
That's because if we needed to do more schools, we're landlocked, right?
We have land at Milford. How big of a property could we build there?
That's not very big, I don't
That's
think.
not very big. Not compared to the acreage we own.
Yeah.
In fact, that was part of the discussion of that piece of property. if I
So we should just
recall.
sell it all, take the money now.
Well, I do think that there is some, and I think to your point, Jenny, is we really do need to figure out what a long-term strategy is. Maybe we dump
Bingo.
two of the 3 properties.
Bingo.
And keep one of the properties for the future. So I recommend that goes back to facilities committee meeting, and we beat that around for a while.
Well, that has been discussed and
Yeah.
will continue to be discussed.
Yeah. And see, I mean, we're trying to, and we're getting estimates, and we're trying to figure out, what the best thing to do with the land is. And so, but yeah, point well taken.
A strategy is just hold it. I'm just saying.
Well, I hear from people in the community, they say, I'm all for raising taxes. I'm someone who will do it because I believe in it and I am going to pay more. But we've got to have a plan. And I think just holding on to land for 10 years is not a
Maybe a
good plan
wise
when
decision.
not when we're closing schools and you're saying we have declining enrollment.
But we're
I
going to
don't
want to
agree with
build
that.
an older, newer, excuse me, we're going to want to build a newer, better one. We may want to build the mesh school and close 2 other ones, and then we have the property to do that.
Yeah, no, I think the point is well taken, right? So we're sitting here debating raising taxes, and yet we're holding on to, if you think about Milford property, Tohickon Valley property,
Right.
future, and this other property, roughly $4 or $5 million worth of land.
Well, you heard this evening that, we're getting estimates on it and what its
Yeah,
value is and all
Milford may
that.
not.
So
Caitlin's buying that,
it's,
but no.
it's not like we're holding on to it and just ignoring it.
No,
It is being looked at.
I agree 100% with you. I could see both sides of it, and I understand.
And due respect to the question at hand, I don't think that has too much bearing on what we're talking about today. You would say, well, of course it does. It's raising $2.2 million, and we're talking about raising taxes. Problem is, I've listened to a community member stand up in almost every one of our board meetings for many months now, talking about wonderful ways that we could generate revenue. But it was always a one-time generation of revenue, and that's what selling the land would be. There's pros and cons to selling the land, but the question at hand is, what are we going to raise taxes to tonight? And that is a long-term annual revenue that we have to decide if we're going to impose upon our citizenry. The land has nothing to do with what we're talking about here tonight, due respect.
Well, and I agree with that, but we have to think about it, and
Correct.
we've got to come up with plans, and
Let's think about it at another meeting. Let's get back to the question at hand.
Well, I'm reiterating what I hear a lot from the community, and I think these are valid points.
Okay, so we're back on the motion of the budget as presented.
I just had a question on the modeling. So at the 4.2% model, your years 2, 3, 4, and 5 are at what increase?
Yeah, so on the projection model that's in front of you for the budget motion is 4.2% in year one, and then we use the Act 1 index. Obviously, we don't know what it'll be in 5 years. We use the current Act 1 index for the next 4 years. So it's 2.8 for the rest of the years in that projection model.
Thank you.
I just want to reiterate what I said earlier, kind of out of context. Thank you, Mr. Klein. But the 4.2% increase will leave us $767,000 short in our budget by the end of next year. The Act 1 will leave us at 1.6 million short. Dr. Harner and his team have always done an amazing job of living within the Act 1 index and coming out usually positive, if not positive, right around a zero net where we haven't had an issue. I'm going to break form here a little bit. This board talked about decorum, so as I make these comments, I wish you would allow me to finish the comments before you choose to respond. But the previous board listened to the 4 candidates who were elected in January constantly criticize us for bringing up PSERS as a point of even a point of consideration, for bringing up special education costs as a point of consideration, for bringing up a lot of financial matters that we dealt with annually as points of consideration rather than suggesting that we somehow were mismanaging our money. And it's interesting to hear Ms. Mitchell comment that PSERS, special education, charter schools are cost drivers that are forcing her into a situation where she's recommending a 4.2% increase. Whereas the previous board annually said, well, PSERS and charter schools and special education is the reason we're even going to Act 1 as opposed to not raising taxes at all. I hope the community understands that this will be the first year since I've been on the school board, and I believe it was 1 or 2 years prior to that, that this community is looking at a tax increase above Act 1. It's just something that everybody should weigh on.
Do you want to feather?
So
in the cap
obviously
or
I'm gonna-
something? Like, I mean, is that something to brag about? Is that what are you bragging about that? Is it, I mean, you closed 2 schools as well. Is that something you're going to say? Are you going to brag about that too? I mean, with all due respect, answer me.
Well, my point is simply that we were criticized over and over again for making decisions, financial decisions, that raised taxes. And sometimes some of the rhetoric during the campaign was that, how dare you even raise taxes? I can't believe taxes are going up every year. And now we're here with these 4 elected individuals proposing a 4.2% tax increase when we were criticized for even going to Act 1.
So the fact of the matter is you have raised taxes every year that you have been on the board.
Yeah.
So what are you bragging about staying at 2.8 for? Is it like, are you proud of that number?
It's a good phraseology. No, I'm not proud of that number.
Okay.
But I'm proud that I didn't have to go over it.
And are you proud you closed 2 schools?
Considering that I believe it put us in a better financial situation, I'm content with the decision. Am I proud? I don't think I would ever say I'd be proud
So
to
that's
do
my
that.
point, right? So is anybody proud of raising taxes?
The issue isn't whether or not we were proud. The issue is whether or not 4.2 is better than 2.8.
Hey, look, vote the way you want to vote, but I don't think it's anything. First off, I never said I wouldn't raise taxes above Act 1. In fact, go back and look at the recording.
I don't think
I said I
anybody
would
said
have to
that.
look at the budgets and figure it out.
Even I
right?
suggested there would be times that I would raise taxes above Act 1.
Okay, I mean, you just put a $100,000 motion on the table and spent that money.
So if I could, I think the problem that anybody who has to sit here and look at recognizes is we're between a rock and a hard place continuously. And we're not even talking about, all we can do is nibble around the edges. The actual cost drivers, except for maybe a few of the ones that Kalen read, nothing we can do about them. So to sit here and even pretend anything different is just false. The bulk of the cost comes from salaries and benefits and retirement, medical, everything. And that's a 5-year fixed, has slight increases, like everybody gets raises. But, well, true, not everyone. I don't think I did. But the key is, that's the problem we face. And, we can do all we want with the little tiny fringes, and all they do is little tiny nibbles around the end, of the budget. We'll never be able to make a significant difference unless we change the bulk of the pie that is our expenses. And we could raise taxes 10% and just keep, but our expenses, are from the administration costs, the teacher costs, and there's nothing in the budget that changes that. There's nothing we can't make an amendment about it. We can't talk about it. It's fixed. And until the contract comes up and we want to say, hey, maybe we should do something about it, we're stuck living in this world of our expenses are huge and mostly uncontrollable.
But there is some part that is controllable.
How much?
For instance, and rather than make investments, and for crying out loud, Ron, how many times are you going to bring up that same exact topic? Like, you want to record it so you can just play it at the beginning? I mean, my point, and I hope I don't have to continue to address this because I don't want to live in the past, right, is I mentioned that you all used Peasers as a scapegoat to avoid taking any responsibility on bad decision-making and improper planning. That is what I said. I never said anything about charters. I never said anything about special education. It's very easy to blame something that is an obvious issue for many school districts to take no responsibility whatsoever on planning for the school district.
Well, now we get to take responsibility. So where can we find these savings?
So right now we are in a difficult situation. We are trying to play catch up on things like crumbling facilities, on, Dr. Hoffman making changes in our curriculum that were apparently long stagnant. And, we didn't have a really good cycle in place to change that curriculum. So we're coming up to date with that. We're dealing with lots of rising costs in a lot of different ways. So I think Dr. Harner has done a great job at trying to find as much as we possibly could in every place that we could. Now, would I like to dig deeper in the upcoming year? Absolutely. For instance, just as an example, even though I'm very much in favor of us having a cycle for curriculum, I don't know that this was the best year to spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars on a new RELA curriculum. I felt like that could have waited a year, but that plan, again, decision was already made before I came on board. So, You know, we've been around for 6 months. Hopefully, we'll be able to help guide and make better decisions in the future to the best that we can.
So it is 58% of the budget, and you're 100, the salaries, medical, and retirement. 58% right here, I'm looking at it.
Way more than that.
This is what it said, I mean, on the website, budget expenditures pie chart, 38%, 38.1% salaries, medical 7.4, retirement's 12.7. I think the issues are fixed cost, right? So then, I mean, when we talk about what we nibble on, it's the other portions that are unfunded mandates that we have to fund. Then it becomes down to like 83% of the budget is spoken for, and we can speak for 17% of the budget. But let's not, I mean, you know, this is probably standard with most industries, right? Salaries are your number one driver
Right.
as far as
And
expenditures are
healthcare.
concerned, and healthcare are your second. So this
Yeah,
is
but
no-
we're locked into a 5-year non-changing chunk, so it makes it difficult
And agree-
to be.
Was that your, were you on the board? I mean, we weren't, I mean, I can't take I can't take ownership for it, I can't,
No, it was my first year, so I didn't feel, I wanted to say something about it, but I didn't feel that I had enough gravitas to say something. Yeah, that's the big word that, yeah.
So anyway, I think that it's something that you're right, but I mean, I go back to what Kaylin did, and I said to her, you know, when you dissect the budget and you start looking and asking questions, I think it you know, puts a lens on it that's, that is razor sharp, that you have to be, you know, we have to look at those small things that we talk about, because that's really what we're talking about as far as the 4.2% increase, or 3.5, or even 2.8. It's a very small number relative to the big budget.
And this whole idea, like you were mentioning, like the 2.8 to 4.2, what is the average?
It's about $50 difference.
It's a $50 difference per year for the average taxpayer, okay? So the fact that, I feel like the whole Act One has been so politicized, and it's like, oh, we stay below Act One, or at Act One, we're so proud. You're still raising taxes. You're talking about a $50 difference. So it's just crazy to me.
If we're only talking about a $50 difference, then why wouldn't you want to vote for 2.8?
Because a $50 difference on, for the average taxpayer is not going to be a huge burden, but when you consider the fact that incrementally will help the school district continue to have a good fund balance, a healthy fund balance, and be able to better plan for the uncertain future, with an overall significant amount of savings due to that small increase, then that is meaningful.
So, and then the other thing to consider about the fund balance is this: it directly affects your bond rating, and if you get a lower bond rating, borrowing money is more expensive. So in the future, I mean, we could keep taking money out of the fund balance. It's a savings account, it's our money, we can spend it. But if the bond rating drops, the cost to the taxpayers for future projects is going to go up, and borrowing money is going to go up. And so while the consideration is, yeah, we have this fund balance, we should just spend it, it does clearly, I mean, you know, Zach went over the numbers with us. It clearly affects our bond rating, and ultimately it could cost, I'm not talking nickels, I'm talking $100,000 more to borrow money, or just to be eligible to borrow money in the future. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Two of the things with regard to the fund balance that Moody's would look at is a one-time large outflow of your fund balance, or if you were using fund balance every single year to shorten or make your structural shortfall smaller. So if you used it one time to cover a one-time cost, that's not a big deal to Moody's. It's that every year, if you're going to use it to cover your structural shortfall, would certainly catch their attention. And we are in a position where, with the Knighting project, we are looking at, for the next 2 years, borrowing an additional $20 million. So that could have a significant impact.
Okay, we have the motion on the table for the 4.2 as presented. Is there any other discussions pending? Okay, with that, I think it's time that we take the vote.
Mr. DiLiberto?
Yes.
Mr. McCucci?
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Ms. Weed?
Yes.
Mr. Akmanowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Kern?
No.
Mr. Jackson?
No.
Mr. Anderson?
No.
Mr. Klein?
No.
5-4, the motion passes.
How does it work with who goes first to vote? I'm just curious. Is it like a random?
I started from the bottom and went up, I started from the top and went down. The president always votes last as part of procedure.
Oh, lucky perk.
Okay, next item is to approve the associated tax resolution for 2018-19 for the budget that we just passed. So there is about 20 minutes of verbiage here that I am not going to read. However, it has to do with the millage and the increased percentages and whatnot. So this is required. So this will again be a roll call vote. Do I have a motion to approve the tax resolution for 2018-2019?
Motion to approve the tax resolution for 2018-2019.
Mr. Akmanowitz, is there a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Weed, discussion?
Just one point of discussion. I am going to vote yes on this one only because the board has committed itself to a 4.2% tax increase. It'd be irresponsible for me to not pass the resolution that we just voted on to approve, just saying.
It's perfunctory. Another word for you.
Procedural.
You're using big words tonight, John.
He uses big words every night.
Is that Quakertown education? Big words?
No, I went to Kutztown area
Okay.
school district.
Okay, any other
Even
discussions
bigger.
besides Mr. Kern's education?
I learned Dutchy words.
Okay, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Akmanowitz?
Yes.
Ms. Weed?
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. McCucci?
Yes.
Mr. DiLiberto?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Kern?
Yes.
Mr. Klein?
No.
8-1, motion carries.
Okay, next on the fiscal agenda is the Business Services Department is requesting approval of the work authorization for Boucher and James for construction, administration, observation, and surveying of the parking lot improvement for the project at the sixth grade center at a cost not to exceed 5% of the total construction paving cost, subject to solicitor review. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the work authorization for Boucher and James?
So moved.
Mr. Kern?
I second it.
Mr. McCucci? Discussion?
So basically, we're just paying him as a general contractor, right? Is that essentially the net here? This guy's a general contractor. He's just going to watch the guys do the work and say, yeah, you did a great job. Give us a thumbs up.
Mr. Shuck?
Construction manager. This is something Mr. Kelly is not capable because of the type of project.
Certainly has a different level of expertise. In addition, we have very many projects going on over this summer that Kelly will be overseeing, like the Trumbrowsville roof, the POF controls, the Richland bathrooms. So there are quite a few other projects that Kelly will be overseeing. And Chris Reese would be the one overseeing the project from Boucher and James, who is our engineer of record and has really been leading that project since the beginning for the sixth grade center parking lot.
This is money we have to spend.
I would recommend it, yes. And the reason the contract's written that way is that is the maximum amount we would spend. The district certainly has the ability to limit the number of hours that Mr. Reese would be spending on the project if we felt things were going fine. Kelly, has full authority to limit that as he sees fit.
Sir? You'll spend our money wisely?
Agreed. This is to make it more specific. This is a unit cost type project, but they have to verify tons of stone. So it's a daily process that they need to measure, quantify, report back. It is a valuable service.
I believe you could think of it as it protects our investment. They're looking out for our good. Because we're not there paying attention to it every day, so we pay somebody to pay attention.
They charge us for 100,000 ton of stone. We only got 75,000 ton.
Or it's the wrong size.
Thank you for humoring me.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Abstention.
One abstention. Mr. Jackson. Motion passes 8 with one
8 to 1
abstention. This moves us to our fiscal consent agenda. Okay. We have approval of Republic Services, Inc. as trash and recycling services provider, July 1, 2018 to June 30, 2021. It's a joint school district RFP venture. Authorization for budget transfers beyond the 2017-2018 school year. Approve the agreement of sale with the Ombudsman Educational Services Limited. I believe that's for furniture. Approve memorandum of understanding with Richland Township for another school resource officer. Approve traffic engineer agreement with Horner and Cantor Associates for a traffic impact study. Approve agreement with the Environmental Control Systems Incorporated for asbestos, PCB, and lead abatement and indoor air quality testing and professional services for NIDIG. Approve agreement with Geotechnology Associates, Inc. for a geotechnical services. Approve the 2018-2019 technology lease. Approve the 2018-19 insurance package policy renewal. Approve the 2018-2019 international travel insurance policy. And so we are looking for a motion to approve the fiscal agenda as presented.
Mr. President, I would motion to approve the fiscal consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Mr. Akmanovitz and Mr. Jackson. Any discussion? No. I see that Mr. McCucci has left and Mr. Kern has left.
Go ahead, take the vote. We only need 5, right? Take the vote.
I understand. Let's give him a couple of minutes just to make sure.
Maybe they had to go to the bathroom.
I'm sure that's what it is. Anybody see any good movies?
Waiting on you. Hurry up.
Did you see Mr. Kern in there?
No.
That would be
Wash your hands,
awkward.
sir.
All right, well, he may take a while, so. Okay, we have had the motion and a second. Those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes almost unanimously, 8,
8 to 1.
8, well, no,
8 to 1,
8-0.
well, 8 to 0.
One's not here.
One's not here.
What do you say, one absent?
You can just say he
One's
One in the
not
abstained.
present. One's not present at the vote.
You can say he abstained. This brings us to the public comment on the facilities agenda. Would anybody like to make any public comment on the facilities agenda? Mr. Spear?
Hi, Chris Spear, Milford Township. So I sort of wanted to bring up, I guess I'm not supposed to reference any particular board member, but something that a board member brought up tonight, which would be the property on West Pumping Station Road, the property at Milford Township, and also how to come up with a long-term plan, again, referencing a board member tonight that I won't name.
Mr. President, before Mr. Spear concludes his comments, your question was for public comments on the agenda. His comment has nothing to do with the agenda at hand.
Facilities.
It is part of the facility, so.
Yeah. That's why I waited. So I do believe the land is a good investment to hold. Just from the time you purchased it 3 years ago till now, it has increased in value, and I believe that holding it will increase it in value even if it's not used. That being said, the land that Milford is on is worthless. It may cost more to tear Milford down and sell that land than it's worth. So what I would propose as a shorter long-term plan is to use the Milford property. Since it's not worth anything, if you tear the building down, if you leave the building up and try and sell it, a charter could move in, further devastating the district. So I believe that property should be used. You're already operating 2 buildings for middle schools. Why not go back to 678, just the way it was? Then take the 6th grade center, use that as a temporary elementary school. You could then close Neidig while you're doing the renovations using the 6th grade center as an elementary school. That number was already brought up during the redistricting committee. It was about $200,000 to update the bathrooms and put a playground in to make that suitable for an elementary school. So that can be an elementary school while you do a Neidig renovation, while you do a QE renovation, while you do a Richland renovation. And I'm even saying maybe not do the addition onto Neidig right now, just do a renovation. Put the gym on it. That way traffic impact studies won't matter as much. You won't be adding all these extra students in. But do a gym, put a new HVAC system in, fix everything to make it nice, but don't put the additional classrooms on. That's where you're going to have to maybe do roadway improvements. That's where you're going to have traffic impact issues. You're going to have all kinds of things. So, like Mr. Makuchi said, it is nice to have shiny new things. It's nice to have these things, but if you can't afford them, you can't afford them. And with the budget, it's going to increase. The debt services for this Neidig thing are going to increase. So even if you do with this 4.2% budget increase that you have now, in a couple years, you're going to be right back in the hole. So I say, use the existing building we have. Use Milford. Use the 6th grade center as an elementary school. That's a long-term plan. You could keep using that as an elementary school while you do renovations in all of the other elementary schools. Then, maybe if the population continues to decline, then you just close Milford again, use the 6th grade center for a middle school or something like that. Or if the population would end up increasing, at least we would have the flexibility that we still have the land on West Pumping Station Road to possibly build at. Or if the population decreases, then you can sell it, because in another 5 or 10 years, it probably will have appreciated that much more than it has in the first 3 years. So that is a long-term plan. I know you say I only like to give you short-term ones, but this is something that would build. And this is something we should be using our existing buildings instead of spending $30 million to just add 200 desks to Neidig. The cost of that is $180-some thousand a desk. If you would have built the brand-new elementary school on West Pumping Station Road, the cost would be less than $50,000 a desk. So there is not really, your return on investment is really poor doing additions onto buildings. It costs a lot more to do that than it does to build a brand-new building from scratch. So if we don't need it right now, don't do the addition on there. Use the 6th grade center building. Use Milford building. Milford's not worth anything sold anyway. And the other thing about possibly selling West Pumping Station Road and keeping the Milford property, if we tore that building down, you wouldn't be able to build there again. There isn't public water and sewer there, and it would be very expensive to bring it back there. So as current building codes go, it would be very cost ineffective to build there currently. So the Pumping Station Road is more desirable for that. And I believe that if you went with a plan like that, we could probably not have these giant debt increases and not be talking about raising taxes above Act 1 again in another 3 years when the debt services for Neidig start coming in. And that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Spear. Any other public comment? Okay, this brings us to the facilities consent agenda. Madam Secretary was nice enough to do a quick consolidated thing for me to read here, so I'm just going to go through this really quickly. Part of the consent agenda is boiler service with HSA Mechanical, $5,000. Burglar alarm monitoring with Security Service Company, $5,494.52. Domestic hot water service, SMS Diversified Refrigeration, $1,600. Automatic door service, Advanced Door Service, $3,150. DSC server room, which is HVAC service contract, strategic, $4,213. SHS server room, HVAC service contract with strategic account services, $6,800. Fire alarm monitoring with Siemens for $450. Grease trap service, Frank Environmental, $2,519. HVAC service contract with Train, $3,093.33. HVAC PM, preventative maintenance with Metz, $30,528. HVAC water treatment with CleanZoid, $6,214. Suppression system service, SSI, $2,690. Kitchen exhaust cleaning, $5,810. School dude, which is work order, facility scheduling, equipment, preventative maintenance, $13,573.98. And last but not least, IPM, Pest and Mosquito Control, Western Pest Services, $3,420. Did I get it all, Mr. Harper?
Got it.
Awesome.
I like the school dude.
Like that?
It's like book bro.
The total for the facilities consent agenda is $94,555.83. Therefore, do I have a motion to approve the facilities consent agenda items as presented?
So moved.
Mr. Jackson, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Mitchell, discussion. Would you all talk yourselves out on the budget?
Possibly.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the grease trap.
We got to get to 9:15.
I know, we're,
All righty. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Next is public comment on the human resources items being presented for a vote tonight. Any public comment? Okay. That brings us to the human resources consent agenda. We have professional staff, support staff, 2017-2018 unit pay, substitute aides and nurses. Therefore, I am looking for let me read this. Resolved that subject to the terms and conditions of any applicable agreements which are ratified or affirmed herewith, the Quakertown Community School District approves the personnel items as presented. May I have a motion to adopt the above resolution and approve the personnel items as recommended?
Motion to approve the human resources consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Ogmonowitz. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mrs. Weed. Discussion. Without any discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstention.
One abstention. Motion passes almost unanimously. Next is public comment on the Office of Teaching and Learning items presented for a vote. Do we have any public comment on the Office of Teaching and Learning items being presented tonight? Okay. The Office of Teaching and Learning consent agenda consists of approval of the textbooks, approval of contract with College Board for PSAT for 2018-2019, Do I have a motion to approve the Office of Teaching and Learning Consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Mr. Anderson?
Second.
Mr. Kern? Discussion?
Same thing with the textbooks. We've got support from teachers, I'm assuming. Yep, okay.
Dr. Hoffman mentioned it was the strangest alignment that she's ever seen across everybody in terms of the opinion of the ranking of these chosen textbooks.
All right.
So I said we should play the lottery with the numbers.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next is public comment on policy and programs consent agenda. Okay, I don't see anybody raising their hands, so we'll move on to the policy and programs consent agenda. First is acknowledge the completion of the 2017-2018 superintendent goals, 97.2% completed. Approval of the 2018-2019 superintendent goals. The revised school calendar for 2018-2019 and non-instructional days schedule. Approval of the agreement with Fair World Academy for extended school year for student number 22092. Approve a special education and services agreement with the Bucks County IU number 22 for 2018 and 2019. Do I have a motion to approve the policy and programs consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Mr. Achmanowitz, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Mitchell, discussion.
Dr. Harner, 97.2%. I'm just so ashamed.
Slacker.
No comment. I'm working with him on 9/15.
Oh, okay.
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Okay. Okay. Any discussion? Nope. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We have some informational items. There is an enrollment report out on board docs. We have a thank you note from Anna Tran, which I read that, and I urge all the other board members to do so. It's very nice. An update on the board briefing book. Okay.
Mr. President, real quick comment. I do not wish to open up a can of worms here, but as the discussion for NIDIG renovation proceeds, please do note that the current Tohickon Valley population was 295, and the current NIDIG population was 397. So you're talking about 100 students at NIDIG more than at Tohickon Valley. Just as we just bring those discussions, please be aware of that.
Okay. Thank you for bringing that point up, Mr. Jackson. I'm sure the Facilities Committee Chairwoman will take note of that for future discussions.
Yes.
Okay. Any new business by any of the board members?
I have a quick suggestion. So I was asking tonight about the voting order, and I know this might be silly, but I would like to request that we start using a random, like some kind of a random software or something that you can just click a button and it'll show you everybody's names on who vote, what order to vote in. I know it seems silly, but I think that it should be random.
Some kind of information if that's possible.
Magic 8 Ball.
There's even like a simple Excel plugin that you could use.
Okay. Okay, this brings us to our last public comment. Is there anyone out there that would like to make a public comment at this time? No? Mr. Bartholomew? No? You look like you got something on your mind.
No. 9:15.
Okay, calendar items. Question, Dr. Harner. Since we have approved all of the items that Mr. Harper needs and so forth. Is there a need to have the next board meeting scheduled for June 28th? No, sir?
There's no reason to. I just wanted the board to be aware because we have a lot of new board members. We'll be hiring long-term subs and things like that over the summer. So I'll be letting them know there's not another board agenda, but that the board would be voting on their employment in August, though. So I'd like to be able to give them that confidence.
For example, the new music teacher.
Would that be done by emails or do we need to have a meeting?
No, you don't need to have a meeting, just
Okay,
understand I'll make the offer pending your decision.
Okay.
Right. That formalizes it, so.
Can I make a quick recommendation that the administration begin now trying to get Stabler Arena for next year's graduation location?
Done. It's already done.
Why not PP&L, Ron?
People still look at Stabler as a place we should be.
Okay.
The only negative comment I've received is about Stabler being better location for families to reunite and parking, those kind of things.
I heard the same comment at graduation on Thursday with my daughter and her friends. So, yeah.
I mean, the cost is relatively similar to both venues, so. Okay, thank you. So, everyone on the board okay with not having a meeting on the 28th? I know how much you guys love to come here. So we're all good with that? Okay.
If that's the case, if there's any committee work, is there any committees meeting next?
There would be the policy committee and the finance committee were also scheduled to meet on June 28th, so I think we can ask the chairwomen of those particular boards if they would like to also cancel their committee meetings.
Probably so.
Yeah, I'll be away, so if finance wants to meet, then.
Okay. All right, so there's no calendar items, ladies and gentlemen. So that brings us to the last official act of tonight, adjournment of the meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
Mr. Agmanowitz, is there a second?
Second.
Second, discussion? None. All in favor, say aye. Aye. 9:19.